Greetings! It is I, Tabletop Dracovin, your Lord and Emperor here at the Dracovin Empire, and welcome back to the Sixth World. Of course, we are diving once again into Shadowrun. As we've been doing, I've been taking on a generalized world tour, shouting out some books and stuff and materials, but introducing you to the concepts of many of these countries that exist because we have maps and information based around them that have been provided in all the various editions of Shadowrun. There's plenty of places in these things that I'm going to talk about that we know nothing about. And that's something that's important to say, is we know very little to nothing about a lot of these places I've, kind of hit upon in the big tour. And yes, there will be more countries that I'll do more videos like this where we'll dive in depth. But today's an interesting one because I don't really think there's a lot of information on a lot of these. These are going to be really simple. And it's going to be quick, maybe not. You see, we're going to talk about Australia, the Pacific Ocean, the Antarctica, space, Mars, and a place which may or may not exist because it is a magical-based thing and magic did return to the world. We'll talk about that. That'll be before we go to space. So, strap on, everybody. We're going on a crazy bit of a one today. This is an interesting one to talk about. Is that one better? Yeah, I like that one much better. So here's our Shadowrun map of 2072, which is pretty close to where we are in the Shadowrun timeline. But we should get started, of course, with talking about the one area I wanted to talk about, the Southern Pacific. Because we do have a number of countries in the Southern Pacific we know about. And we have a little bit of information on them. So we can kind of start with them, and then move on to, of course, talking about other places in the world. We got a list. Don't worry about it. We got a list. So, let's mention the countries that exist within the South Pacific that we know by name exist. And we know nothing about them other than name. There's a lot of places like I talk about in other continents where we have names like things like in Asia, you've got Yakut, Papua New Guinea, Jerusalem, we know nothing about there. In Europe, Braz, Kofno, Brussels, Amatria, Dinktria, Montenegro, Novi Pazzi, Vodfayani, Grobandia. We know these by name that they exist, but we don't know nothing. But we don't have a lot on them other than they are a country or a city-state. Here we have the Corporate Republic of Fiji, Melanesia Coalition, the Autonomous Realm of Kiribati, the Federated States of Micronesia, the Nara Protectorate, the Free Tahiti League of Polynesia, and the Tonga Allied Regime. These are names. That's what we know about them. Names. And I'm not giving any books here. I'm going to try to, not really give books here, because most of the time there isn't a lot of books. Certain ones, when we talk about in a minute, that one we've got a book for. Yeah. We can kind of talk about Hawaii a little bit. But other than that, we'll leave Hawaii to last in this set of the things we're going to talk about. I'll try to divide these up a little bit. Let's start with Australia and New Zealand. So Australia is in the Oceania region. It's got 25 million people. It's meta-friendly. Whatever discrimination exists is usually against non-Australians, not meta-humans. Or those that assimilate into Australian culture and choose to, keep their foreign culture, language, and customs. Things like Asian trolls and orcs who are outcast in their home countries found Australia to be a welcoming country. Basically, Australia's like, if you come to us and you assimilate with us, you're welcome, and it is very friendly to whoever wants to join. The first mana storms appeared in 2011. In 2022, on October 24th, the Australian and New Zealand Allied Confederation was formed between Australia and New Zealand, and there were Imperial troops that were stationed there until the death of Emperor Kenichi. I can talk a little bit about Sydney. It's a major city. It's technically its own independent city, and it's one of the few areas in the world where mana storms can last very long periods of time. Again, it's mentioned in books. You know, I can point out page numbers in various books that these are mentioned just by a little bit, but it's not a lot. There's just not a lot of information on these places. It's pages. Pages. Nothing major. Australia is mentioned a bunch of times in Shadows of Asia, as I can say, in Year of the Comet, though, again, it's mentioned. New Zealand is a parliamentary democracy tribal council. In Auckland, Prime Minister Ian George, as of 2063, and the Maori Tribal Council. New Zealand we know a little bit more about, so we can talk a little bit about New Zealand. Honestly, New Zealand, not the amount of information here, it could probably be its own thing to talk about. Do a New Zealand in the future. So, they were the first nation grant rights to goblinize metahumans. Many Asian metahumans sought asylum in New Zealand, similar to Australia, against persecution. So it has a substantial metahuman population. Like I mentioned, in 2022, they formed the ANZAC, the Australian New Zealand Allied Confederation Defensive Pact, standing up to Japan. It's purely military in nature, but to begin with, but has become an economic, social, and military union between the two kind of areas. They fought a number of skirmishes against forces of disintegrating Indonesia until the crash of 2029. Indonesian pirate bands continue to attack ships coming into from New Zealand, keeping their naval forces busy. New Zealand was one among the awakened and third world nations that reinvigorated the United Nations in the 2050s, and is a steady contributor to the UNAF, the United Nations Military Force. In 2061, when the Ring of Fire erupted, New Zealand was shaken too, not as bad as Japan. I'm going to butcher this one. Nangarohu erupted. A lot of forests and destruction there. In 2064, New Zealand aided Australia's annexation of New Guinea in order to stabilize the region, put an end to the pirates' operation in the Indian Islands, gain control of those natural resources. New Zealand's Prime Minister declared that an act of war, but disappeared shortly after making that statement. Anzac's forces have called the opposition, and, you know, most of the country's states welcomed the new less-than-voluntary membership into Anzac. So that's the big things related to that. So it's governed by a democratic cabinet and a council of Maori elders governing the country through a dual-chamber government. Auckland is the capital of New Zealand, and the Maori nation of Aotearoa. The two nations basically are sharing the physical territory of the islands, but they're technically separate. It's kind of an international weird one there. So yeah. One land, two states is basically what New Zealand is. So, yeah. They have a unique thing. In the UN Security Council that oversaw the second crash, New Zealand was a present non-permanent member, and it sat on the council in 2074. So New Zealand as the country of these two countries has English as primary language, and it's a lot of colonial membership. It's a member of the British Commonwealth still. It is the most environmentally conscious country in the Sixth World. Aotearoa is much more traditional, tribal, and proud than New Zealand. They're peaceful people. They live by ancient laws and taboos. Give a strict hierarchical order. And the traditions of the Maori are giving way to some modernity against much of the conservative elements. Young Maori raised in Auckland prefer a stable life in a corporation, wearing a suit every day, flying to court meetings in that kind of ways. But New Zealand and Antarctica is very environmental. Both of them work together for that kind of thing. So basically, they're two cultural states with several satellite cultures. And it has close ties to Australia, shares many major sport leagues, such as the OZFL, football, and OFC, soccer. So, yes. Cyberware is relatively scarce in New Zealand, since they reduce mana. Cyber is also detrimental in water. Gene tech is a little bit more in there, and Bioware is readily more available. There's North Island, South Island, smaller islands, some cities, demographics. We can talk about them, but I think that's probably enough to give you an idea about New Zealand / Antarctica, which is a very unique and interesting country. Because again, like, it shows to reflect how the world changed, especially with like people like the Maori people. A lot of they're very much more traditionalist. In the awakening to magic, they gained a little bit more of a political background. And the idea that there is basically two countries that work together as almost two houses of a of government over top of, you know, this same area. Very unique. But New Zealand was an interesting one to talk about. Guam Freeport exists. So Guam was a United States territory, captured in 1898. But when the UCS was formed up, and in the mid-2030s, basically during this time period, UCS pulled out of the Pacific, especially because Japan was showing once again imperial signs, and they basically wanted to nothing to deal with it. A commander of the island, Admiral Wallace, basically refused to go. His supporters joined him with a bunch of local allies to defend their home. So basically, they went AWOL and stayed behind to defend the island. Admiral Wallace was originally from Texas. He cooperates with CS military, allowing it to use them as a friendly base to harass Aslan interests, monitor shipping channels. But effectively, Admiral Wallace is the sort of leader of it, and now it's exactly what it sounds for, the Guam Freeport. So, you know, military withdrawals during the tumultuous times in 2030s, a group of military people stay behind, get together with the locals, and become their own country, which is effectively a free port. So, yeah. It's a free trade zone. Megacorp shipping firms, scientific research vessels, kind of the viewing area, has good gray and black markets. Shadows of Age is what we're going to look into. Age. It's spelled a little different, but yes. It's Wallis. Wallis. You can find a number of books, but we can talk about the Kingdom of Hawaii a little bit. It's a parliamentary monarchy that came about in 2017, when the Hawaii seceded from the United States. Again, unlike in our world, a lot of shit had already gone down by the 2017s. So, you know, magic was already on its way back. Hawaii succeeded, basically, at this point in time. I think I may have talked a little bit about this when we talked about North America. I can't remember. Did I? I don't recall, but I'll talk about it now. There was, in 2017, some limited eruptions of Halakala, because of the Great Goat Stance. It was a little bit connected to that. It wasn't a massive eruption, but basically a descendant of King Kamehameha III takes the name King Kamehameha IV, declares a sovereign nation. He dies. His son becomes the fifth. His son steps down, and his son becomes the sixth. Sixth dies at sea. The fifth is retaking the throne. Retaking the throne now. It's the islands: Hawaii, Maui, Kalamea, Lanai, Mokulea. I'm gonna butcher the heck out of these. It's the Hawaiian Islands. It really is. That's about it. Like, you can look into some of the individual islands a bit, but, you know, this is about all we know about Hawaii. It's, you know, we know it's an independent nation now. It's a kingdom. That's about it. I don't even know how it relates to the, you know, UCIS and how, if they get along, or any other local countries, because don't talk about that anywhere. It's an unfortunate thing that, like, as I was saying, on the South Pacific, we don't know anything about. New Zealand is the only one I was able to throw you a large amount of information about. I was able to throw you a little bit about Hawaii, a little bit about Australia, a little bit about Guam, Freeport, nothing about any of the other nations in this area. But moving on, we can talk about some place that we do know a little bit about. It comes from a number of books that mention some things. I'd say Running Wild, Shadows of Asia, Street Magic, Year of the Comet. Arsenal mentions some things based on it. This is Antarctica, the southern continent. It was always the end of the Earth. So things changed in Antarctica in 2006. With the corporate resource rush, several corporations moved to do oil surveying. Eco-tourists slowed their efforts. Not much actual resource harvesting was actually accomplished. When the awakening arrived, there's storms of ice, wind, and hail kind of pelted the continent constantly. And basically corporations went to greater pastures. Effectively, the place was going to be, you know, hit up by corporations. Magic comes back. The place becomes even more inhospitable. Yes. Decades later, Halley Comets pass in 2061. Activity picks up in Antarctica again. There's natural orichalcum deposits in the snow and ice. Bizarre magical phenomena. The first team to discover the orichalcum was a Japanese scientist team in the Trans-Arctic Mountains. There was veins found in Queedmon Mountains. In 2062, a city was found in high-resolution radar in Bentley Subglacial Trench. City in quotations. Short of discovered other geometric shapes, all within 40 kilometers of Mount Kilpatrick. So, Japan's Antarctic Show Base has the naturally occurring orichalcum find. And, yeah. So, politics. UCS. The Russia, until Yamatsu stepped in, their Vostok station was abandoned for decades. Britain and Japan are the main political powers in Antarctica. The main corporations are Ares, which are allied with the UCAS, Yamatsu, allied with Russia. There's several Japanese megacorps allied with Japan, and Seder Krupp, which is actually independent and influencing there too. There are hundreds, maybe even thousands of isolate survivors and prospectors who braved the snow and ice to actually live in the wilderness there, occupy abandoned research stations, oil rigs, and other man-made shelters. They're generally considered pesky squatters by corporations and governments, and not really a lot is done to evict them. So, yes. Antarctica. I can talk about the geography of Antarctica a little bit, but it is the basic same geography that exists nowadays. Not really a lot has changed. It's one of the few places that has a hole in the ozone layer that has existed since the 1980s. Hey, they didn't change the fjord as much. Magic behaves strangely in Antarctica. The entire continent is a gigantic mana surge area. The auroras, astrals, wax and wanes over the continent, especially in winter, and act as a mana flare when it's fully expressed. The unpredictable nature of magic in the region have actually contributed to establishment of remote incarnation facilities for criminal mages and other equally dangerous criminals by the Revlup secured. So there's actually a prison system there because of, well, it keeps criminal mages in place. So Revlup, Saderkrupp are the big ones, and all the corporations connected with countries. But that's Antarctica for you. So, I mean, there are things to do in Antarctica, certainly. Let's go out on a limb here and put on your tinfoil hats. We're talking about Atlantis. Now, in the real world, in Shadowrun, it probably already did, yes, exist. Why? Because magic exists in this world. So, in Earth Dawn / Shadowrun universe, Atlantis usually refers to the islands of Thera, capital of the Theran Empire, which is in the eastern Mediterranean Sea, which sank into the sea in August 12, 3113 BC, around the time the Fourth World ended. That is usually what refers to as Atlantis, generally speaking. But the Atlantean Foundation exists in order to find Atlantis. You know, it's a continent inhabited by powerful magic and technology, which stuff to see. Probably magic. It's probably magic. It's always magic. You know, it's the thing that, you know, not concerned by science, but hey, look at this. We're in a world where a lot of, like, mystery and myth and stuff reappeared in it because magic came back, and when magic went away, the stuff disappeared. So, will Atlantis exist? Does it exist again? I don't know, but I was gonna mention it because it's kind of a place, and this, and Thera, the capital of the Theran Empire, you know, well, we can talk about it. Again, it's connected to, Earth Dawn. It's the main antagonist of the Earth Dawn role-playing game is the Theran Empire. It's a thing. It's in the Shadowrun universe. There are some immortal elves and dragons which remember it. So, yeah. Just to note, because, hey, let's introduce some Earth Dawn into this, because they technically were originally connected, and yet not so much now, because they're technically owned by different people, which is one of those weird things. Is the lore hasn't changed. It's weird. Anyway. Thera was warned of the coming of the Scourge and horrors, offering their technology protection to the Terrors, to those who pledged loyalty to the Empire. Yeah, a lot of stuff happened. So, you know, Theran Empire survived the Scourge, which is the coming of the horrors, which is technically what happened in Shadowrun, but you don't talk about. Anyway, that's enough of Earth Dawn, because it's not an Earth Dawn, it's Shadowrun. And we're going to talk about space! Yes, space. We'll end up with Mars. Let's talk about a number of, well, space stations and other locations that, you know, exist. Because they're there. There are manned stations in low altitude orbit. Many of them are corporate controlled. Apollo is one of them. It's controlled by Ares. There's about 50 of them technically. We could talk about Apollo. It was unveiled in orbit by Ares in 2019. Originally, 2029, the crash virus disabled it, killing all on board. Doesn't mean it hasn't been resettled, but there was it was the first completely built and operated by a corporate. So, yes. Ares has moved space operations off of Apollo into Daedalus and Icarus, which we'll talk about. Well, maybe not Icarus, because I don't think that's on the list here. It serves as a transport hub for cargo and passengers from Earth. So, yeah. Everybody died there at one point in time. Now it's still used. It's not much. Camelot is a property of Novatech, formerly Fuji Orbital. It's a research facility that focuses on gravity-free materials, science, and molecular engineering. Launches to maintain satellites in geosynchronous orbit. There are no other corporate sublets in the pod space of Camelot. So it's just Novatech. Yeah. How about Camelot? Daedalus, which we mentioned. Hey, it's a space station located at L4 Lagrange Point. It's within a mana warp of levels 8 or 9. So that's a thing to talk about. Thank you, Firefox, for freezing up briefly. These things just it's corporate Ares space. Ares macro technology controls it. It's one of their more major ones. That's it. That's all we can say about it. Dark Side Junction. We know that in 2055, Fuji began construction of it. Most launches from the station come from Formosa Bay. And that's it. It exists. Echo Station, formerly known as Halo Station, is one of a handful of space stations in geosynchronous orbit. The altitude required to remain stationary over Earth. In 2017, first components were launched by Harris 3, and then the crash course killed everybody on board in 2009. Whether it's still in use or not, I don't know. It's mentioned in the Six World Art Almanac, so... yeah. Helios is the only known manned space station in lunar orbit. So it's not orbiting the Earth, it's orbiting the Moon. It's owned by Ares Macro Technology and sits at the L3 solar Lagrange point directly opposite of the Earth in solar orbit. Its purpose is unknown, though suspected to be a launch platform for future deep space missions and deep space observatory, and Ares keeps the projects there under wraps. We know about it. Helios. Frickin', I'm gonna try this here. Its name means Skyforge, but it's Himmel-Schmiede, implying manufacturing capabilities. It's run by Sater Krupp. Mentioned in Year of the Comet and a few other places. That's all we know about it. As you can tell, these space stations, we know about them. That's about it. We know about things. Moved beyond Earth. Junkyard, the nickname of Angel Station. It's at the L5 Lagrange point, Harris M3. It was built before 2027, used for microtronics and material engineerings. Crash of 29, shut it down, killing all aboard. Fuji purchased it. It chose not to salvage it. So the Hulk's location, Lagrange point, intends to attract space junk. Yamato intends to construct a new station at L5 point. But Novatech, as successor to interest in Fuji, claimed the area belongs to it. Corporate court is still disputing the problem. So the junkyard is the formal Angel Station, and everything else is trapped. So, Mir. Guess what? It's got an alternate history. Mir Space Station, Russian space station. In our real life, in 2001, it existed at that point when we deliberately deorbited it and it broke apart in the atmosphere of retention. In the world of Shadowrun, it operated from 86 to 96. The Lagrange points are not off the top of my head, but it is in the Wikipedia. Let me look up. I can click on look. It shows pictures of them. Which one of these had one of these had a link to Lagrange points where I could learn more about them. I don't remember which. And I should have looked it up and mentioned. Oh, there it is, Lagrange points. How I found it was under Helios. Just because I'm mentioning them a lot, I'll put this in here. Lagrange points are points of equilibrium for small mass objects under gravitation interest into orbiting body. Okay, yeah. So it's the points of space where three orbital bodies cancel the gravitation pull. It's the points where you could build a station and be in an orbit, basically, a controlled orbit. It would stay in its place. I guess that's the idea. In the Shadowrun universe, though, Mir was sold to Harris 3M, who renamed it Wheelchair, and continued to operate in 2008. So I don't even know if it's still up in space. We don't know. Nerva was stationed at L3 Lagrange point. Harris M3 built it before 2027 using station of zero gravity research. It was also believed to be conducting the Black Project. The crash of 29 shut it down, killing all aboard. Fuji purchased it. Megacorp chose not to salvage it. So it's an inoperable Hulk currently. So, but Nerva exists there. Shiba no Kuji is a orbital resort operated by Yamametsu. It's Yamametsu's first orbital station, and the world's first orbital resort. Launched in space specifically for the purpose of recreation. It specializes in zero gravity recreation and medicine. Pod spaces are rented out by Kawashin Industries, Montobe, Tantan, and Wuxig. Monobe frequently asks for more space pods, but wasn't allowed to rent any more than they already have. Many people travel here via Ares Apollo Station, which without Apollo, remember, that's a transition fleet. They need a valid passport and a medical attest cleared by EVO's own medical personnel. On Apollo, they take a 6-hour break when their papers are checked, and they undergo a cyberware scan. Any of their cyberware which can be used as a weapon or for communications deactivated for the trip. If they refuse this, they're shipped back to Earth immediately. 2 ferries undergo a trip to Apollo to Shibanoki every Thursday. But the Evo station has 2 of its own shuttles for emergency use and are able to get 1 more to the station within 12 hours' notice. It's found in low Earth orbit, and that's all you know about it. So if you want to go take a spacecation, you can. Silver Pinnacle is in geosynchronous orbit. It's called the Station House. It's a transorbital, only orbital station. The station used to launch and maintain space assets such as telecommunication, weather, and navigation satellites. Yeah. For corporations with little aerospace presence, that's what this is used for. Clients include Pan-Rim Communications and Ramaku. Some claim the station maintains spy stats for CAS, Israel, and the United Kingdom. It serves as a refueling and resupply depot for Novatech and Proteus AG. Alright, let's keep going. Take a drink. I'm gonna butcher that one, really. I'm gonna butcher that one so badly when we get to it. I talked about Ner. Did I? Okay. Let's talk about the Spindle. It's a spindle orbital platform was opened by Az Technology in 2048. It's run by the Shibata Construction Engineering under contract with Az Technology. And that's all we know about it. It exists, the Spindle. T-Lock, which is also Az Technology, it's another one of the 50-man space stations. It's one that, again, there are 50-man space stations in lower Earth orbit. We only know, like, maybe half a dozen to a dozen names about them. On August 18th, 2070, the Rogue AI Sojourner took over the station. Public unveiled it as an orbital biological weapons lab and threatened biological attack unless all captive AIs were set free. The AIs pulse certain horizon negotiated a peaceful ending. So that's very interesting that it was a bioweapons lab, and an AI took it over and revealed that. And other AIs negotiated a peaceful settlement with that. We're gonna try this one again. I'm very bad at pronouncing anything, even in English. So, Treffpunkt Ramhaften, Meeting Place Spaceport, is a Proteus AG space station located at the L1 Lagrange point. Shadowrun Space would be a fun campaign, yeah. Dealing with some of the space stations and stuff, too. Because there are some public ones. In the Earth-Moon system, station is kept secret while under construction. Paris AG made a very public bid for one of the rewards in Uncle's Will. And while everybody was concentrating that, they sent up construction material from their Devil's Island arcology. It became fully operational in 2062. It's used for general ZOG research and development, as well as black research projects. Portions of the stations are leased to AG Chemi Europe, Transient's Neuronet, and ECC Electronics. So they secretly built it, but they didn't hide it once it was built. Oh, cool. Let me actually do this. I'll just show you guys that. Hey, I have a actual image map of this place. That's really neat. Look at that. That's kind of cool. That's Transplex Triumphant. I just got a map of that. Surprising that exists. I like that. And then finally, the Zurich Orbital Habitat is an orbital space station home to the Zurich Orbital Gemeinschaft Bank. It acts as a luxury home for some of the wealthiest people in the Sixth World. It's owned by the corporate court. So, yes. It's a formerly Space Station Freedom owned by Ares. It was sold to the corporate court in 2023, renamed to the Zurich Orbital in late 2020s. Corporate court installed itself in the space station soon afterwards, and it was the Zurich Orbital Gestalten Bank established the primary office of the station in 2033. And so, yes. Primary residents, there are a number of them, secondary residents, and former residents that you can look up. It's within a mana warp of level 8 and 9, with Matrix Host. It is, yes. But that's a little bit about space, but we have 2 more places to mention. For now, we go to the moon! What do we know about the moon? It's mentioned things are going on there. Why? Because there's a lunar mining corporation. And Artemis Lunar Arcology. Both are things. So, the Lunar Mining Corporation, subsidiary of Sator Krupp, runs mining operations on the moon. What else does that mean? Who the hell knows? There's the book Hazard Pay, and Target Wastelands talks about this a little bit. But I guess Hazard Pay is the big one to talk about this, because, I mean, it's expensive to work on the moon. And the Artemis Lunar Arcology is the moon base of Ares macro technology on the moon. What else do we know about the moon? Nothing. We know people are there. This is one of the things that I love and hate about Shadowrun is there was mention in earlier editions, before even they might mention 6th edition. They've mentioned in many editions space-related stuff. We don't have it beyond what I'm talking about now. It's like space stuff. Cool. What is there? I don't know. Let's talk about Mars, because there is a Mars base. There actually is in this universe. So, 2001, there's a space probe to Mars. They cover up pictures of pyramids and skeletal remains that something appears draconic. There you go. Magic world, there's weird stuff going on. December 2011, NASA follows up a manned flight to Mars, crashes, kills 5 of the 8 astronauts. In 2042, Ares Project Synonia launches a probe to perform detailed scans of Mars. 2042, UCS Veiled Agents intercept and destroy all data from the probe. In 2063, Yamatsu, with the help by Russia and the Pacific Prosperity Group, sent a manned spaceship, Valentina Trescus, to Mars. As far as public knows, this is the first manned mission to the Red Planet. They send live footage back from the planet by the crew. So the earlier stuff that happened was covered up. When it was returning to Earth, it disappears from tracking communications for 6 days, reconnecting with Earth from lunar orbit. The ship's helmman, Antonio Krylenko, became CEO of Yametsu in 2066. In 2070, Yametsu, now known Evo, established the Gangrene Mars base. In 2070, we get a Mars base. It's the largest off-Earth colony in the solar system. It began plans to create it in 2063. 2065, cosmonauts from the Moscow are the first metahumans to land on the surface of Mars. They construct a surveyed area. Yes, Supplies are dropped. Drones begin to assemble the base. In 2068, the first arrived base becomes operational. 2074, contact with is lost as the CDF outbreak hits critical mass. The cognitive fragment disorder, which is a personality disorder caused by nanites. In 2077, Monads reveals their presence to the public by broadcasting a message over the Matrix. Gargadon becomes the staging ground for Project Exodus. Its Monads are the metahumans infected with CFD, which, in 2079, the deep space exploration colonization leaves Gagarin. Some of the metahumans said to be in the thousands infected with CFD had their AI personalities removed, leaving their bodies catatonic at the Mars base. The Space Rescue Service came to save the survivors after the Monads left. So, yeah. Basically, nanites override someone's body with an AI. That was cognitive figment disorder. So basically, nanites were taking over bodies, and the Monads were the people that had that takeover, and they took over the Mars base, and then they left to colonize somewhere in deep space. Populated by Monads and containing a server host of AIs. It was originally supposed to leave in 2080, but with the Boston lockdown, it was sped up. And it was said that the launch vessel had technology maybe years or decades ahead of anything else in the Sixth World. So that's an interesting little storyline for the Mars base and for fun on the Mars. So, yeah. Things happened. But that's Mars. Anyway. There's a lot of contradictory knowledge on a lot of these things because people say different things. But I think that's it. We introduced you to everything. Hey, look at that. This is the rest of the stuff. I said today wasn't going to be particularly, super long overall, and I managed it. As much as a lot of this stuff is interesting, and I can talk about, cool. No, I can get rid of that. I can talk about New Zealand and, Antarctica and a lot of places like that. And again, I think out of all those places that we vaguely talked about, New Zealand's the only one I could revisit in a bigger episode, which I might do. I might put it on my, deep dive videos for specific countries. But, yeah, there's a lot of stuff going on in the Pacific that we know super little about. There are so many countries in the world. I talked about this in all my other Shadowrun 6th World Almanac videos that we don't know a lot about. These we just know names. That's as little as we know. We know names of places, a lot of these things. They're mentioned. What do we know about? I don't know. They're mentioned that they exist. We know some things about a few of those. The fact is, Australia's a pretty big country, and what do we know about Australia? New Zealand's the one out of the two of them that we actually know a lot about. New Zealand's had some stuff talked about. Hawaii, it's an afterthought of something that left the U.S. Guam, it's mentioned why it's a free port. And we talk about Antarctica. There really isn't a lot going on there. And, hitting up into things like, will the ancient actual version of Atlantis reappear? Because, I gotta be honest, it's one of those weird things is now that Shadowrun and Earthdawn aren't as connected as they used to be, it's hard to say what left over from one will lead to the other. Because, again, we still have stuff in Shadowrun. It didn't disconnect in the lore just because you can't connect it as directly anymore. The things that were already established are there. And it's one of those weird facts that I think, makes it unique for something like Atlantis. And then all the space junk's just fun to talk about. An adventure in space would be fun. It would be very difficult to run. I think a lot more difficult than your average one because there's a lot more, control. You're talking about area where, spacesuits and stuff like that. Things like going to the moon bases and Mars bases would be cool. And I would love for more stuff to be in here. Just like I would love a lot of countries to be visited. A lot of the space stuff. All of the colonies outside. Are there more? Have people been settling on asteroids, other places farther in the solar system? Because they've had 80 years more of technology to figure out how to get to places. They had a Mars colony. It's taken over by some people, but I can get it back now. Theoretically, they've got it back now. There's so much, that this episode particularly shows up on how little we actually have had in the sixth world. So say third world. Sorry about that. Sixth world, the Shadowrun world. There are big chunks of things which we have seen, but it would be great to know more. I think that's one of those things and I don't know how much we will get in the future as it is. I don't know how well Shadowrun as a 6th edition especially is going as it. As I said, I've always expressed my general dislike of 6th edition. I never thought it was bad. It just wasn't for me. I felt like it wasn't as good as previous editions, so I'm sticking with them. Again, not that couldn't be an introduction to it. I, in fact, would probably, if you're going to start someone 6th edition, recommend 6th edition for beginners. It might be a good way to get into it because, honestly, Shadowrun can be quite complex. Stop Shadowrun Space, very fun game. I think we'll leave it here because, honestly, there isn't really much more to talk about. Now, think about it. There isn't much more. Our visit to the 6th world, our tour across its lands, has shown that it is a very unique and diverse world. And a lot of the cultures that we know now exist still in this world. A lot of the people still live their lives. Whether they're in the same countries, new countries, whatever they're doing, tends to be the same. Lives tend to be difficult. And yes, it's a much more violent, it's a dystopian world. It's a world that, honestly, could best be described as almost non-apocalyptic. I guess dystopian is the best word for it. But it's an interesting world that, when we're getting towards the 6th edition, towards the 2080s, we see that the world, out of the fires of plague, massive crashes of infrastructure, of magic reawakening, large magical surges, has continued to fight on and gain strength, and the will of people is strong. That's what a Shadowrunner is. A strong-willed person. But we see it in the various nations and lands. That no matter what happens, people find a way to survive and rebuild something of their old lives. We keep them in. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed this. If you joined me live on twitch.tv/Dracovin Empire, hey, welcome. Follow would be great. Just hang around with us. We do a lot more tabletop stuff and some general gaming stuff, too. Joining me on YouTube, of course, hey, YouTube. Remember, always great to leave a like, comment. Have you been to any or used any of these locations in any of your Shadowrun games or been to them in a Shadowrun game? I'm actually really curious if anybody's gone to space. Ringing a bell is a great way to give support, and of course, remember, subscribe to the channel. I forgot, can't forget to mention that. And of course, if you're joining on one or the other, go check out the other too. We'll follow on Twitch and join me live. So if you do want to check it out live, every Tuesdays and Thursdays in the early afternoons, I do tabletop related streams like this one, and Saturday in the late mornings, usually around 11 o'clock. It's just usually 1 o'clock in the afternoons for Tuesdays, Thursdays. I also have a live play Pathfinder every Wednesday evening, 9 p.m., and discussing games. And all this stuff goes up on the YouTube channel a couple days later when you can join me. As I said, I do some gaming too on Twitch, so if you want to join me for that kind of stuff, go ahead. That's not why you're here for the tabletop stuff, of course. Social media. I have a twitter.com and a Discord channel. You guys check those out. I random information, thought patterns. There was a tree frog on a milkweed plant outside my house I took some pictures of. I throw pictures of like that up sometimes on both of them. Things like that. So it's mostly scheduled stuff, but that's a great way to keep on track with what's going on. You don't have to cancel a day or something like that. Cancel streams. Or there's delays and stuff for uploads to YouTube and things like that. I really should upload that. I'd say more in my YouTube comments section. My channel. Anyway, that's a future me problem. I think that's all the shout-outs. I really do. I think I shout out everything properly. I think I'll give my spiel. Look, everybody. I hope you're here for the end. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned about... It was a very cute frog. It was a tiny little baby tree frog. Very adorable. Probably eating the aphids off the milkweed. Everybody, have a great rest of your day. Hope you join me in the future. We'll revisit Shadowrun too. We'll revisit so many other tabletop. But until those times, I give you wholehearted and from the depths of my soul, farewell.